Ever catch yourself wondering, like, what really makes you believe the things you do?
Hmm.
And then you see, like, big shifts in what a whole society thinks, the stuff that really changes how things work. It makes you wonder what causes that
Yeah.
and what actually makes someone, anyone actually do something based on those beliefs or even, just a random idea.
Right.
Those are some pretty big questions, right? About what we believe, how change really happens, and what actually drives us to, take action.
Absolutely. Those are the very questions we're diving into today.
Exactly. And to help us unpack all of this, we're turning to this book, The Devils.
By Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Right. But don't worry, we're not going to do a whole book report thing.
Yeah.
We're going to zoom in on these key moments and characters.
Exactly. We'll use them to uncover these timeless ideas about belief, change, and why we do the things we do.
Yeah, it's all about exploring these really human questions without getting lost in the whole, complicated plot of the book. Okay, so, to kick things off, let's take a look at this guy, Stepan Trofimovitch.
Okay.
He's, totally obsessed with being seen as this brilliant intellectual.
Oh, yeah. He's built this whole identity, this image for himself.
Right, and then he starts to feel like, the world is forgetting about him.
Like he's fading into obscurity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you imagine that feeling? Like, all that work to build up your reputation and then poof!
You really see that need for validation in the text. It even says he would not have slept for nights together if there were the faintest breath against his reputation as a poet, a learned man, and a public character.
Whoa.
That's intense.
Right. It shows how central this craving for recognition is for him. I mean, it's a pretty strong human driver for a lot of us, wouldn't you say?
Totally. So here's where it gets really interesting. This is for you listening. Stepan's name suddenly starts popping up in connection with these, more radical new circles. He even gets compared to Radishchev.
Who was, a huge figure in Russian thought, quite radical for his time. Exactly. And suddenly, all of Stepan's, snobbery towards everyone else just vanishes. It's like someone flipped a switch.
It's a sudden burst of energy.
Totally. And the text even says all his disdain for his contemporaries evaporated, and he began to cherish the dream of joining the movement and showing his powers.
It's like, okay, is this a real change of heart or just a way to be relevant again? Back in the spotlight.
It does make you wonder, right? How much of what we believe is tied to, wanting to belong and be accepted.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
We see this mirrored with Varvara Petrovna, too.
Oh, yeah, Varvara. In a way, she's the one who kind of created Stepan's public image way back when.
Totally. She was the first one to really buy into her own invention.
Exactly. So when his name pops up again, her faith in everything she thought she knew, it just explodes.
Yeah, she gets thrown into this violent ferment.
It's like her investment is suddenly paying off.
Totally. And it's interesting because the book describes Stepan as, after a fashion, her daydream. So her connection to him is deeply personal, almost like he's a pet project.
That's a good way to put it.
But you have to remember, this belief, this intense faith in Stepan, it comes with strings attached. Like the text says, she exacted a great deal from him, sometimes even slavishness.
Whoa! And then it also says she incredibly harbored resentment for him for ages.
It's almost paradoxical. It shows how belief can get tangled up with expectations and even resentment,
Yeah, for sure. So both of them are super fired up about this new movement, right? They're talking about going to Petersburg, starting a magazine, the whole 9 yards.
I went all in.
And then, surprise, surprise, things shift again. Stepan, seeing Varvara so intense about it all, he starts acting all condescending towards her.
Oh, classic Stepan. Always got to be the smartest guy in the room.
And of course, Varvara immediately laid up in her heart against him.
Ouch.
Typical power struggle.
It shows how messy things can get, even when people seem to share beliefs. Varvara's initial support, it came with this unspoken expectation of respect. And then Stepan, with his big ego, he just steps all over that.
Yeah, he wounds her pride and that fuels her anger.
And for you listening, it's a good reminder that belief and personal power, they're often intertwined, especially in relationships.
For sure. And, even with all this intellectual posturing and these sudden shifts in belief, you see this one thing about Stepan Trofimovitch that stays constant.
Oh, yeah.
This deep need for connection. He's truly afraid of being alone.
Even with all the intellectualizing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this very human vulnerability peeking through.
Right. He needs Varvara, even though their relationship is, often a bit of a roller coaster.
Totally.
He needs an audience someone to acknowledge him.
It's like that fundamental human desire to connect with others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is important for you because it shows that our beliefs often shift because of these core needs, like wanting validation and belonging.
It makes you think, right?
For sure.
Okay, so let's zoom in on Varvara Petrovna and this whole idea of like inventing a belief, or at least inventing Stepan as this public figure.
Yeah.
She didn't just like support him. She really shaped how everyone saw him.
Yeah, and her faith in this image she created was like rock solid. She was totally convinced.
And remember those long-held resentments we talked about?
Oh, yeah.
That shows us that her convictions were pretty rigid, maybe even unforgiving. Once she got an idea in her head, she wasn't letting go.
Right. So you see the strength of her convictions in her actions, like that sudden trip to Petersburg.
And that whole ambitious plan to start a magazine.
And not just talk, right?
Nope. It's action driven by deep personal investment in her beliefs. Makes you realize how powerful that can be.
Totally. And think about how often we see this in our own lives and with other people.
Right.
We get so invested in an idea that we take action no matter what.
It's like belief fuels action.
Exactly. And in Varvara's case, it also highlights that, maybe there's a bit of pride and wanting to have influence mixed in there too, especially when it comes to Stepan.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's switch gears a bit. These excerpts also give us these little snapshots of like clashing worldviews.
The real generational divide.
Exactly. Like there's this story about this young guy who thought general was the worst insult ever.
That's a striking image, isn't it?
It really makes you think. Like for him, general probably represents everything he hates, hierarchy, oppression, all that old-fashioned stuff.
It's like the symbol of the changing times and all these new ways of thinking bubbling up.
Right. And then you've got these established writers, the genuine and quite indubitable celebrities. Varvara thought they'd be these impressive figures.
Nilfgaard.
But instead, they're described as being stiller than water, humbler than the grass.
Almost like they're scared.
Yeah, and the text even says they were shamefully cringing before this new rabble. Like they can feel their power slipping away.
It's a pretty clear picture of how cultural power can shift. And for you listening, it's interesting to consider, like, what happens to those people whose influence fades away? What do they feel? Do they try to adapt?
Makes you wonder. And then you've got Lee Putin, who has this whole other perspective.
Oh, yeah, Lee Putin. He's a character.
So he basically criticizes Stepan for taking money from Varvara.
Like it's some sort of compromise of his principles.
Yeah, maybe even a betrayal of these radical ideas. It suggests that even within these new movements, there are all these shades of belief, different lines people draw.
Lee Putin's view adds a layer of complexity here. It shows that even when people seem to be on the same side, they don't always agree on everything.
Right, like what are the rules? What are the boundaries?
Exactly. Lee Putin's disapproval suggests he has this more rigid, maybe even idealistic viewpoint compared to Stepan's more practical approach. It makes you think, like, how many different standards can exist within a single movement?
That's a good question. Okay, and then there's Nikolay Vsyevolodovitch.
Yes, Nikolay.
At first, people don't like him, but then he gains respect.
Public opinion can be so fickle, can it?
It's like, what changed?
It's not totally clear from the text, but there are hints that it might have something to do with, like, rumors of him suffering, or maybe a change in how he acts.
Like how he carries himself.
Yeah, exactly. At first, there's this general outburst of hatred, but then it fades. It really shows you how quickly reputations can change based on these external factors, even things people just think are true.
It's wild, right? And it makes you think about all this talk of new ideas and how everyone's opinions are shifting. What exactly were these new ideas causing such a stir in the town?
Well, the excerpts don't really give us a clear definition.
Which is kind of clever, actually.
I think Dostoevsky does that on purpose. He leaves it open to interpretation,
So it could be about, like, the bigger forces of change that happen in any society?
Exactly. It's not so much about specific 19th century Russian politics as it is about the universal dynamics of how things change, how new ideas take hold.
That's a good point. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about this tension between individual belief and, like, what a group believes or does.
That's a juicy one.
Okay, so Kirillov, he's got this obsession with why people don't kill themselves.
Pretty dark, right?
Yeah, but also fascinating. It gets to these core ideas about freedom and our fear of death. What are your thoughts on that?
I think for Kirillov, it's all about this radical idea of individual freedom. He sees the fear of death as this ultimate limit on our freedom.
Like it holds us back.
Right. And when he talks about killing deception and links supreme freedom with suicide, it's like he's presenting this extreme view of personal autonomy.
Ooh, that's intense.
It is, and it really clashes with this more collective idea we see in the discussion about informing on a political murder.
Right. Like, even within this group that seems to share some political views, there's still disagreement about right and wrong. And, like, how much loyalty do you owe to a cause?
Yeah, some people put the political goals above everything else, and others have this stronger sense of individual morality. It really highlights how complex group action can be.
Makes you wonder if any movement can truly have a totally unified ideology.
Good question. And then you've got these really extreme visions for how society should be.
Oh, yeah, like Shigalov and his crazy idea of killing millions of people to, fix everything.
His solution, it's horrifying, especially when you compare it to the lame teacher who talks about his fanaticism for humanity.
They're like polar opposites, right?
Totally. And it's a good reminder that these ideas about societal change, they can lead down some really different and sometimes dangerous paths.
It's a huge spectrum of beliefs. Okay, so last thing I want to touch on is the role of truth and deception in all of this.
Okay.
So Stepan Trofimovitch, he's constantly putting on a show, deceiving himself and others, even when things get serious.
He's playing a part.
Yeah, it's almost like he can't help himself.
Stepan's whole identity is kind of a performance. All his pronouncements, his shifting beliefs, even his moments of crisis, there's this theatrical quality to it.
And, it makes you wonder how much of what we see in other people and even ourselves is just a kind of act.
That's a good question for you to think about.
And then there's Varvara Petrovna. She's not exactly playing it straight either.
Oh no, she's a master manipulator.
Yeah.
She knows how to use her wealth and influence to get what she wants.
It's a totally different kind of deception, more strategic.
Absolutely. Varvara's manipulations show how power and influence can be used to shape narratives, control situations, and often, benefit her own agenda. It's like she's creating her own version of reality.
And it makes you think, like, how much does that happen in the world?
All the time.
And then on top of all that, the whole town is buzzing with rumors and gossip. Everyone has their own version of events. It's impossible to tell what's really going on.
It makes it really hard to find the truth, especially when a society's going through such intense change and ideological conflict.
Right. And then you've got Nikolay Vsyevolodovitch with his super cryptic and contradictory statements.
Oh, yeah. Like when he says, an atheist can't be a Russian.
What's that even supposed to mean?
Well, it forces us to confront these really deep-seated and complicated connections between national identity and religious belief.
Right.
It raises questions about what it really means to belong to a particular culture, and how much shared beliefs define that community. It challenges the easy answers.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking.
And, all these different threads we've been discussing, they point to this bigger idea that both individuals and societies often operate on these self-created narratives.
Like, we tell ourselves stories to make sense of the world.
Exactly. And sometimes confronting the truth can be really, really hard.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the devils, what are some of the big questions these excerpts raise for you?
I think one of the biggest ones is what truly drives our beliefs.
Right. Like, is it a deep conviction, the need to be accepted, or something else entirely?
Right. And then how do societies deal with periods of massive change and all these conflicting ideas swirling around? How do we balance individual freedom with the influence of group beliefs?
And how do we figure out what's real when we're constantly bombarded with deception, both from others and even ourselves?
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. But these aren't just questions from a 19th century Russian novel. They're still relevant today.
Absolutely. These are timeless human dilemmas. And they're even more relevant now in our era of rapid change and information overload.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Think about those inventions of belief we talked about. Do you see them in your own life, in the world around you? What are the needs and desires that drive those beliefs? And what are the consequences, especially the ones we might not even notice? It's worth taking some time to reflect on how belief and change interact in your own world.
I agree. It's something we should all be thinking about.